Welcome to Multiplication Matters with speaker and author Dr. J.D. Payne. Dr. Payne is the pastor for church multiplication at the Church at Brook Hills in Birmingham, Alabama, and has written several books on the subjects of missions and evangelism. Here's J.D.
Hey, Faith family. Thank you for checking out today's edition of Multiplication Matters. I'm J.D. Payne, pastor for Church Multiplication. Today, I want to talk about the least reached states in the United States of America. You know, as we begin to think about what it means to make disciples of all nations, I want us to recognize that all nations also involves people within our own country, and that's not just the minority people groups that we have talked about before in previous episodes of Multiplication Matters, but even the Anglo majority as well. And so I want us to spend just a few moments during this episode to think about some of the least reached states. We're going to talk about 13 in particular today within the United States. You know, for us living here in Birmingham, Alabama, we find ourselves in a place that is very evangelical, meaning that there are large percentages. There is a large percentage of those people living within our city and within the state of Alabama that would claim to have had a born-again experience, claim to be followers of Jesus, claim to follow God's word and to tell others about Christ. They would consider themselves evangelicals. And so when we begin to look at the state of Alabama, Alabama as a whole is 42% evangelical. 42% of our state is considered evangelical. And what that means is that when we begin to look at all the evangelical churches across denominations and non-denominational groups within the state of Alabama, what we find is that there is one evangelical church for every 700 people within the state of Alabama. One evangelical church for every 700 people. Percent of evangelicals in the state of Alabama is 42%. We're one of the highest states in the United States when it comes to that. And so whenever we live and we spend a great deal of our time within that context, oftentimes we forget about the realities that exist within our own country that is different from where we find ourselves. And so today I want us to think about what is happening, what is taking place in other states across this country as we think about making disciples of all nations and as we as a faith family begin to send out teams, church planting teams, to go into other parts of the United States to make disciples that leads to the planting of churches. And so I want to begin with number 13 today, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly for our sake of time. I just want to share with you the evangelical percentages, the percent of believers that would be showing up in some of these other states, the 13 least reached states in our country, and also the number of evangelical churches in those states to people that live within those states. So we start with number 13. And that's California. California is at 9% evangelical. There's one evangelical church for every 2,700 people. Next on our list, as we're counting down, so to speak, is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is 8% evangelical. One evangelical church for every 2,100 people. Number 11 looks like on our list is the state of Nevada. Nevada is at 8% also. One evangelical church for every 4,000. We've got some small notes here on my phone here. 4,100 people. Delaware comes in next at 7% evangelical, one evangelical church for every 2,500 people. Maine, 4%, one evangelical church for every 2,300 people. New York, 4%, one such church for every 4,000 people. Connecticut, 4%, one such church for every 4,100 people. New Jersey also comes in at 4% evangelical, one evangelical church for every 4,400 people. Vermont is also at 4% evangelical, 2,800 people per evangelical church that's out there in Vermont. New Hampshire is also at 4%. One evangelical church for every 3,700 people. Massachusetts is at 3% evangelical, one evangelical church for every 4,700 people. Rhode Island is at 2% evangelical, one evangelical church for every 5,100 people. And then number one on the least reached states in the United States is Utah, with a population, or excuse me, a percent of only about 2% of the state are followers of Christ, one evangelical church for every 6,500 people. Now, I share these numbers with you. I know sometimes when we talk about stats, we kind of get just overwhelmed in numbers, but the reality is that behind all these numbers are individuals who do not have a relationship with Christ. And the reality is that these are not other countries. These are not peoples living in faraway nations from us, but they live within the United States. And so when we begin to see the lostness that exists within the United States and the great need for new churches engaging people, making disciples, seeing churches birthed out of the harvest and seeing their own pastoral leaders raised up from out of those new believers, we begin to see the great task that is set before us within the United States context. The reality is that by far the greatest need for the gospel is outside of North America. You've heard me say that on this Multiplication Matters before. You've read it. I've written about it. I've spoken about it. The greatest need by far is outside of North America for the gospel. But the reality is that there's an enormous amount of lostness within the United States. All these states that I've just quickly run through, I mean, we're looking at states that are 91 down to 98% lost when it comes to their populations. There are countries in Africa, there are provinces in China that have higher evangelical percentages than many of these states within the United States. And so I just want to share this with you today, just to kind of raise your attention to this issue, to be praying about this opportunity, to be able to go and make disciples of all nations in a North American context, because part of glorifying God by making disciples of all nations means that the nations are also among us as well. And so something to guide our thoughts, something to guide our prayers as we think about the multiplication of disciples and leaders and churches throughout Birmingham, throughout our world, but also throughout North America as well.
Join us next time for another installment of Multiplication Matters with Dr. J.D. Payne.